One of the most legendary figures of recent centuries, allegedly the inspiration for the famous story of the vampire Dracula. His enemies spread his legend throughout the rest of Europe, with ruthless tales that blurred the line between fiction and reality. Prince of the region we now know as Romania, the name of Vlad Dracula or Vlad the Impaler has been carved into history as one of the most violent and cruel rulers in European history. While in his homeland, he is recognized as a national hero who restored order and fought for the sovereignty of his people. Today, we are going to tell you the story of this complex and brutal figure who has endured in the popular imagination to this day. This is Ronaldo Carrillo speaking, and this is the New Encyclopedia. And for those who have asked how they can support this channel, it's as simple as leaving a comment, giving it a like, and sharing the video on your social networks. You're already giving us a big boost here on YouTube. Also, below you can find a Patreon where any support you can give us is more than welcome and necessary. Without further ado, let's start with this fascinating story. Vlad III was born in the winter of 1431 in a military fortress in Transylvania, what we now know as the nation of Romania. At that time, it was mainly made up of three principalities closely related to each other: Transylvania, Wallachia, and Moldavia. These regions belonged to the Kingdom of Hungary for several centuries until they became independent and entered into a vassal relationship with the bordering powers. Vassals of the Hungarian Empire in the north or the Ottoman Empire in the south, based on the geopolitical reality of the time. Vlad was the second son of Vlad I, the legitimate prince of Wallachia, though not occupying the throne then, due to a dispute with his half-brother. And although there is some uncertainty about who his mother was, many historians identify her as Princess Chiana, daughter of Alexander I of Moldavia. His early years were characterized by an unstable lifestyle, marking a time dominated by violence, conspiracies, and disputes between governments. The same year he was born, his father was in Nuremberg, where he had been appointed by the King of Hungary. As a member of the Order of the Dragon, a monarchical military order that required its initiates to defend the cross and fight against the enemies of Christianity. After he was admitted to that order, his father received the name Dracula, which at that time meant dragon, thus becoming known as Vlad Dracula. Therefore, his son, the protagonist of our story, would receive the name Vlad Dracula, which meant the son of Dracula. It would be the name Vlad Dracula that would later inspire the title of the famous work by Bram Stoker from 1897 called Dracula. This is also linked to the legends of Vlad Dracula. The Impaler and other European monarchs had the habit of drinking and bathing in the blood of other people. The Principality of Wallachia, like Europe, was mainly made up of Christians, Catholics, and Orthodox. Meanwhile, the Ottoman Empire, which was at its peak, was ruled by Muslims. Amid the great struggles between Muslims and Christians, the territory where Vlad was born was the center of constant turmoil. The Wallachian and other principality nobles pursued maximum autonomy. Meanwhile, the Ottoman Empire, based in what is now Istanbul, Turkey, was experiencing a period of great expansion. Meanwhile, the Hungarian Empire to the north sought to maintain its broad influence in the region. With the help of the Kingdom of Hungary, Vlad's father managed to win the throne of Wallachia after his half-brother died in 1936. The ruler of a region or principality was called a voivode. When this happened, young Vlad was only 5 years old, and he moved with his family to the city of Targoviste, which was the capital of Wallachia at that time. However, after Hungary lost power due to the death of its king, Vlad's father was forced to put the Principality of Wallachia back under the vassalage of the Ottoman Empire. And by March of 1442, after refusing to support an Ottoman invasion of Transylvania, Sultan Murad, the second leader of the Ottomans, ordered Vlad Dracula to go to Gallipoli to prove his loyalty, but when he arrived, he was captured by the Muslims. Shortly after, he was released, but to guarantee his loyalty, his sons Vlad and Radu were taken as hostages at the Sultan's court. During that time, the young Vlad learned about different cultures, such as the German, Ottoman, and Hungarian. In that environment, his ideas, character, and leadership style took shape. However, Vlad endured great suffering and imprisonment in an Ottoman underground dungeon. These years influenced the formation of Vlad's character, since his Ottoman captors often whipped him for being stubborn and rude. On the other hand, his younger brother Radu received special attention from the Sultan's son named Mehmed II. As a result of this, Radu was released and ended up converting to Islam, and then was granted permission to access the Ottoman royal court. As a consequence of this, Vlad developed a well-known resentment toward his brother Radu and the Sultan's younger son, Mehmed II. Vlad was deeply at odds with the relationship his brother had with Murad Zair and with his new life at the court. This constantly worsened his negative view of the Ottoman Empire. That was how he found refuge in learning the arts of combat and in the use of force. More specifically, in handling the yataghan and the spear. The truth is that all his experiences gave him the determination to do everything within his power against the Ottomans, and in the best of outcomes to reclaim the throne and leadership of Wallachia by 1447. Vlad Dracula and his eldest son Mircea were killed in the swamps behind their home by the forces of John Hunyadi, who was the regent of Hungary at that time. After killing his father, John Hunyadi handed over the Principality of Wallachia to Vladislav II, Vlad Dracula's second cousin. In light of this event, and after learning that their deaths were also planned with the decisions of some noble families of Wallachia, the young Vlad made a promise that he would keep for the rest of his life. He would take the throne of Wallachia and avenge the atrocious deaths suffered by his relatives. Shortly after hearing the news of his father's death, around 1448, Vlad was released by the Ottomans, who now saw in him the possibility of reclaiming the throne of Wallachia for the Muslims. So now, with the support of the despised Ottomans, Vlad planned his return to Wallachia to seize power and overthrow Vladislav II, the man who had taken his father's place. Fortunately for him, he received the support of Sultan Murad, who rejected the idea of a prince in Wallachia backed by the Hungarian Empire. Vlad accepted the help of the Ottoman Sultan and immediately led a small invasion, made up mainly of Turks, into Wallachia. And he managed to drive Vladislav II out of power in a short time. At only 17 years old, the young heir succeeded and took command of the principality. However, many obstacles lay ahead. Without the important support of the region's nobility, Vladislav II managed to gather forces, and just 2 months later he returned and regained the throne, defeating Vlad in battle and forcing him to leave the country. After his fall, Vlad fled to Turkey and then settled in Moldavia, where he remained for 3 years under the protection of his uncle, who was Prince Bogdan of Moldavia. Because Wallachia did not have a clear system regarding succession to the throne, external forces, mainly made up of the Ottomans and the Hungarians, could provide military support to the claimants to the throne of Wallachia as long as they were loyal to their empires. In the midst of this situation, Vlad lost his protector when his uncle, Prince Bogdan of Moldavia, was assassinated in the year 1451. Once again, he was forced to flee, although this time he escaped into the wild interior of Transylvania, which at that time was still under the control of Hunyadi, the regent of the Kingdom of Hungary. At that moment, his chances of regaining power were very slim, until the political options shifted in his favor. Sultan Murad II passed away and his son Mehmed II took his place. Hunyadi knew that the new Ottoman leader had his sights set on Hungary, Wallachia, and Transylvania, and that he was also deeply ambitious. He prepared for the impending confrontation that seemed to be approaching. For this, Hunyadi had the support of Vladislav II, whom he had placed on Wallachia's throne. But Vladislav II eventually changed his mind and separately aligned himself with the new sultan. As a result, the enraged Hunyadi tried to find an immediate replacement who would support him on the battlefield. The only candidate with these qualifications was none other than Vlad Dracula. Impressed by the extensive knowledge that Vlad possessed about the mind and inner workings of the Ottoman Empire, as well as the deep contempt he held for the new sultan, Mehmed Hunyadi decided to forgive him and kept him by his side as an advisor. He then presents him as the candidate of the Hungarian kingdom for the command of Wallachia. For 1456, the Kingdom of Hungary launches a new offensive by invading Serbia, a region that had been under the command of Constantinople for quite some time, in order to expel the Ottomans. Meanwhile, at the same time, Vlad Dracula invades Wallachia with his own contingent. In the midst of the conflict, he meets Vladislav on the outskirts of Targoviste, and after defeating him in hand-to-hand combat, he decapitates the former prince. After both campaigns prove successful, John Hunyadi, the regent of Hungary, suddenly dies of the plague. However, Vlad the Impaler's goal had been achieved at the age of 25. Nevertheless, Vlad Dracula's objective had finally been consolidated. At 25 years of age, he was the prince, no longer just an heir, but someone exercising power in his homeland. And in this way, he began his famous rule. Knowing that there would be no shortage of threats to face due to the stories of Vlad as a ruler, which we are about to tell you in this video. Meanwhile, Vlad Dracula was alive and shortly after his death with the rise of the printing press. In addition, his figure became famous throughout Europe through the stories spread by his Slavic and German enemies, speaking about him and his alleged extreme cruelty. Books were written that at the time could be considered bestsellers, where there is no certainty about what was real and what was fiction. Written sources from that period in Romania are quite limited, although what did survive was a rich folkloric and oral tradition, which regarded Vlad as a national hero, a just man who restored order, centralized the government, and fought for Wallachia's independence against the empires of the time. Issues that would be fundamental in the formation of Romanian nationality. Some argue that these processes would not have been possible without the brutal punishments that we still have yet to mention. As soon as he took command of Wallachia, Vlad realized that his principality had been devastated by the ongoing conflict between the Ottomans and the Hungarians. In addition to the internal struggles among the boyar nobles, who were at odds with each other and would still continue to conspire to bring down Vlad, so his first task was to ensure internal control. The rule of Wallachia and in daily life, anarchy prevailed. Vlad had the great challenge of restoring order in a violent and turbulent environment with many enemies. The first major problem he decided to face was that of the nobles who controlled much of the country and were not loyal to him. The same nobles who were responsible for ending the lives of his father and his brother. In this way, his desire for justice, along with the need to secure power, led him to carry out one of the most famous episodes in his repertoire. He invited 200 nobles to a party, seemingly to discuss their differences. However, at the end of the banquet, Vlad's forces violently removed the nobles from the hall and forced them to march to the ruins of Dracula's fortress. There they were imprisoned and forced to work on the reconstruction of the old castle, where many died from exhaustion. Meanwhile, others who were too old or too weak to work were impaled on the spot. That is, a stake was driven through their bodies. That's where his famous nickname comes from, Vlad the Impaler, who, according to myths, also drank the blood of his victims and dipped bread into this red liquid. In the same way, Vlad established a strict zero-tolerance policy against corrupt officials and criminals, with harsh punishments even for minor offenses. This began to bring favorable results for the pacification and revitalization of the region. Besides jailing or neutralizing nobles, he took a hard stance against crime, corruption, and dissent. Vlad the Impaler made the decision to choose commoners, even foreigners, to hold public office. That is, people who did not have noble origins, unlike Voivode or Prince Vlad. He could appoint, dismiss, or even execute any of his new officials. In this sense, he also granted new conditions to the peasants and craftsmen of Wallachia, freeing them from the taxes they used to pay to the Ottoman Empire and guaranteeing them greater security and peace of mind. However, as in any civil war, there were many innocent common people who became victims of the fierce police policies that characterized Vlad, the Impaler. On one occasion, he decided to get rid of the wandering beggars and homeless people, whom he considered thieves for living off the sweat of others. According to historical accounts, he invited a large number of these people to enjoy a banquet, locked the doors, and burned them all inside the hall. But a new conflict was about to develop when Vlad adopted a hostile policy against the so-called Saxons of Transylvania, a group of related peoples who had settled in those territories since the 12th century, and who were opposed to Vlad's government. These groups backed several nobles conspiring against Dracula. During the following years, Vlad imposed heavy taxes and blocked the trade of many of them when they refused to pay these taxes. However, by 1459, when the Saxon city of Kronstadt in Transylvania openly gave its support to a direct rival of Vlad, the ruler's response was forceful from a military standpoint. After demanding new trade restrictions on Saxon goods in Wallachia, Vlad ordered their villages to be raided and thousands of people to be impaled. From these groups, there were older men, children, and women. And according to legend, he sat down to dine among the victims to witness their suffering firsthand. According to the accounts of his enemies, he always did this with a large number of people, creating a sort of forest of impaled victims that washed away the blood of his enemies. He also had the rebellious Saxon city of Kronstadt burned to the ground. And when he returned to Wallachia, he impaled the Saxon merchants who tried to violate his trade laws. In this way, a silent peace was restored in Wallachia in 1460. Although Vlad continued to identify himself with the prestigious Order of the Dragon, signing his name as Vladislaus Dracula, which meant son of the dragon, his enemies began to spread at that time the less noble nickname of Vlad the Impaler. Despite this, many in Romania remember him as a necessary and fundamental leader who brought positive aspects to the development of his people. Vlad the Impaler once launched a fierce offensive against the region's Catholic communities, assisted by many of his allies who, as Orthodox Christians, did not look favorably upon the Hungarian Catholics and the Saxons of Transylvania. Cities like Amlas, Făgăraș, Sibiu, and Tarabarsi suffered many casualties after being brutally attacked by Vlad's forces before they surrendered in the year 1460. These reprisals deeply caught the attention of Pope Pius II, who wrote a document in 1462 stating that Vlad Dracula had killed a total of 40,000 Catholics. Between the winter of 1461 and the spring of 1462, a new conflict broke out after Vlad rebelled against the Ottomans in his desire to have an independent Wallachia, and he stopped paying tribute and showing allegiance to Sultan Mehmed II, so the Sultan decided to do whatever he could to put an end to Vlad's reign. The Sultan plans an assassination and delegates 2 trusted men to orchestrate a trap and carry out the murder of Voivoda. However, Vlad finds out about this situation, and when the messengers went to his principality, Vlad had them executed. According to the accounts of his enemies, the Turkish messengers had come to Vlad to pay their respects, but they refused to take off their turbans in accordance with their tradition. So Vlad supposedly decided to reinforce the tradition of these Ottomans by nailing their turbans to their heads so they could never take them off. The truth is that after dealing with the Sultan's envoys, Vlad's troops carried out a campaign of attacks against the nearby fortresses that were part of the Ottoman Empire, and then they plundered their lands. Together with his army, Vlad carried out the punishments that made him famous and impaled thousands of Turks along with their families, accusing them of theft, corruption, and conspiracy. Then he displayed them along the enemy route on the outskirts of the Targoviste region. In response, Mehmed gathered an Ottoman army that exceeded 150,000 men, a force of a magnitude rarely seen at that time. It is said that his aim was not to conquer Wallachia, but to end the Impaler once and for all. Vlad gathered only 30,000 fighters, including women and children, to fight for him. However, he had several ideas to take advantage of his numerical disadvantage. The Voivoda ordered the wells to be poisoned and any fortress that Mehmed could use to his advantage to be destroyed. Then they carried out a historic night attack in which Vlad and his men infiltrated unexpectedly and attacked the Ottoman camp while their men were sleeping. In the midst of a chaotic environment, he and his men wreaked havoc, causing many casualties in the enemy army. In the same way, Vlad tries to finish off the Sultan in his tent. Although he was close to achieving his goal, he ultimately failed. Finally, the Ottoman army advances and heads to Targoviste, the capital, but finds the city completely deserted, surrounded by thousands of impaled Turkish bodies, the same ones the Impaler put there in previous conflicts. However, amidst the situation, Vlad's younger brother Radu long favored by the Sultan, sought to seize the opportunity for himself. Radu assured the Wallachian nobility that if they fought on the side of the Ottomans, they would regain the privileges that Vlad the Impaler had taken from them. In this way, Radu sought the sympathy and approval of the Turks while gaining the support of the nobles, thus building a base of support from those who were tired of the Impaler. However, Radu's maneuver went quite badly for him after Mehmed II gave him the approval and support to fight for the throne of Wallachia. The brothers faced each other on the battlefield. And in a short time, Vlad Dracula managed to defeat his brother and his forces, once again emerging as the victor. However, his power and the troops that accompanied him had diminished considerably after hard times of war. Despite early successes, his political position was more precarious than ever. Therefore, the Voivoda decides to travel to Transylvania to seek the support of the monarch of Hungary, Matthias Corvinus, son of the former Hungarian regent John Hunyadi. However, this decision sealed his fate. There, the Hungarian monarch ordered that Vlad the Impaler be imprisoned, thus abruptly ending his principality in 1462 and leaving Basarab Laiota as the new prince. Vlad was held as a prisoner by Corvino from 1462 until 1475. That year, Vlad regains the Hungarian monarch's favor, who recognizes him as Wallachia's legitimate prince, but doesn't provide military aid to reclaim his throne. Vlad had regained his princely title but lacked a castle and territory to rule. By 1476, Sultan Mehmed invaded Moldavia and defeated Stephen the Great at the Battle of Valea Alba. Vlad the Impaler gathered a contingent and launched an offensive against Moldavia, forcing the Ottoman leader to retreat. To secure the support of Vlad the Impaler, Matthias Corvinus ordered the Saxons of Transylvania to support Vlad in the invasion of Wallachia to reclaim the throne. At first, Vlad the Impaler achieved victory and expelled Basarab, the iota to the principality. However, this new principality would last very little. La Iota gains the support of the Ottoman Empire and returns a month later with renewed forces. In hard battles, he manages to defeat Vlad the Impaler, who finally, after years of fierce rule, was killed at the hands of his enemies and his head was decapitated. According to historical accounts, he was cut into pieces, and his head was sent to Sultan Mehmed to be displayed at the entrance of the Ottoman capital. Vlad the Impaler was an endless source of inspiration for many stories. Although almost all the writings describe him as ruthless, the truth is that his myth surpassed the man of flesh and blood, and his complex and fierce personality has managed to fascinate historians and become part of the collective imagination up to the present day. His legacy is still a subject of debate, and his story helps us better understand that beautiful but turbulent region that is Central Europe. Thank you very much for watching this video. This was Reynaldo Carrillo speaking. And don't forget to support us by leaving your comment, liking the video, sharing it with your friends, and following us on our Instagram account, also called The New Encyclopedia. See you next time, and God bless you.